Well, good morning. It seems like the fall weather, everyone's cuddled in their bed this morning, maybe by the cozy fire, a nice flannel sheets. I'm not sure. But you guys are all here. You made it, and you guys are going to heaven, okay? And so we have a video to start with today, and we could not figure out how to get the sides on, so we'll try to duck so that you guys can see the video behind us. Wade.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
Sometimes that's what marriage is like. And
Calm down.
not in our house, but we've heard stories about other people's houses, and sometimes there's issues like that. We today are going to talk about the impact of words, and we've talked about, last week was listening, and this week we're going to talk about speaking. And there's two things that reasons why speaking is important. One is we learn, speaking is how other people learn about us. If we didn't talk, it would be very limited of what people know about us. And if we're good at speaking, we can help others learn about themselves. I don't know if you guys have what it's like when you pick your guys' kids up from school, if they're school age. But if I left it with easy communication, it would be, how's your day? And all I would hear is, good. And I would learn nothing about their day, and they wouldn't learn anything about themselves. And so when I feel able to do it, when I'm not resting on the easy, I ask them, what was good about it? You know, what did you know, who did you hang out with today? I have to like suss out a response. And in doing so, sometimes I get feedback about their day. I learn more about them. And I hope that the goal is for them to learn more about themselves. So we speak to tell others about us, and we can help other people learn about themselves. The second thing is, don't divorce what you say from who you are. The underlined is, our words speak our heart's language. For me, if I'm going to use a personal example, is I can't say that I am patient and love my kids if everything that I say is irritable and angry. If that's the case, I need to start checking inward into the wellspring of my heart, because that's usually what comes out. You know, it's what's spilling over is what's in my, from within. I had a client that would constantly be, talking negatively about his wife, but he would say, I love my wife. And it's like, well, it doesn't sound like you love your wife. And so we have to do kind of a self-check of what we're speaking in our hearts.
Yeah, one of the things as we were preparing is this concept of speaking, and what is it like that God created us to have language. So if you think of how God communicates to us and what's his heart language, he began to speak with that is through creation. Like he began to say, this is who I am. Let me give you a clear idea of that beauty. So if you think of his goal was to draw us close and to create intimacy, to help us to know his priorities, to help us know his complexity, that's the whole goal as we're in communication with each other, is can we try to draw it out? Often I talked with clients about this concept of having a mirror. I remember when I was in therapy, one of my therapists said, who's holding up your mirror? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she explained this concept of who do you allow to reflect back to you, and what are they reflecting back to you? And so if we're really listening to God's voice, he begins to reflect back to us truth. If we're listening to others, we hopefully are hearing back from them a good, wise version of ourselves, and we too are trying to speak that into them. In Proverbs 18:4, it says, "The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook." And so if you go into it, I was trying to compare some verses to find out what that meant, deep waters. I was thinking like were so incredibly profound. And really what it was saying is that we have so much to say. We have a ton of words that could really fill up basically a lake full of water, the depths of our words, and yet they can just be contained there. They don't really actually nourish anything. So the difference is wisdom. When we're having wise words, they actually are like a flowing stream where it begins to nourish everything around us, which makes me think of how Jesus talked about living water. So we have talked so much about being ignorant and prideful, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But we want to focus also on what does it look like to actually have wise speech.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about what that is. And ignorance, there's ignorance and prideful talk. The main difference is people that talk in wisely are the goal, the motivation is I want to learn more about you and I want to learn more about myself. That's the motivation of a wise person. An ignorant person isn't intentional about learning about others or about themselves. And the motivation isn't necessarily on purpose, it's just unintentional. They just keep moving forward. Prideful, on the other hand, is they refuse to learn about others and kind of refuse to learn about themselves. They don't want any correction, and they don't really care to learn about anything else. They just either want to be right or just continue feeling like they got it all together. That's pride. I'll give you an example of ignorance. I'm ignorant about water heaters. I don't know if there's any water heater experts in here, but we owned a house for 14 years before we moved here. And you know how many times I changed? I emptied the water heater? None. I never, because I didn't know it was a thing. If you look at it, many of you may have not even looked at your water heater besides walking by it in the garage, but it has a spout on it. And the spout is you hook a hose and you empty the water heater. Again, and I Googled this because I've heard about it, but I didn't know why. You're supposed to do it every 6 to 12 months, and the purpose is, over time, minerals in the water begin to accrue. It's called sediment. And if you don't empty it, it continues to grow, and you have less hot water on the top because the sediment is taking up a lot in the water heater, so you have less hot water. Second, it takes more energy to heat up the water. And so you have less water, and it's taking up more energy to do it because it's got to heat through the sediment to heat the hot water. That's what the impact of ignorant and prideful talk does, is continues to build sediment in our life that, there's less energy to deal with our spouse because there's a lot of sediment that's been building up over the years.
Were you done? Sorry, I was going to cut you off.
You look like you're going to cut me off, so I stopped talking.
Well, and so that we're going to move into this concept of what does it actually look like to have like right timing and have it in the right way. What is the wisdom of our speech? Like, how do we contain it? So if you'll see this comparison and contrasting between those categories of we want to be restrained, we want to be gracious, we want to listen to the words, even if they're rebuking words or reproof. We want to seek knowledge, which Daniel was thinking of some table talk questions to kind of bring this out with us is...
We got some hard ones today.
Yeah, they're fun. So it's this idea of like words do impact us, and how so? So the first question is asking, if you remember, I can't remember the wording, what was something someone said to you growing up that was negative and still impacts you today? So you think about at any point in your life, those words that were spoken early on begin to kind of build. I remember when I was, I think, third grade, I was at this private school, church school, and I was running around, and it was picture day, and I grew up pretty poor, and so I was in a nice outfit for what I thought, but it wasn't like a fancy dress. My hair wasn't really done. It was just like I showed up. And so I was chasing around the pastor's kids, and they looked the very opposite. Hair was beautifully curled, ringlets, and these beautiful dresses, but we're chasing around. And I remember the older people saying, Renee, I need you to stop doing that because they look really nice, and we want to keep them looking nice for their pictures. And I was like, ouch. Because it was just, even though they weren't saying it, they were saying it. Like, we're just wanting to, help them out here, but, you're kind of doing your thing over there. So that kind of stayed with me as this feeling of like lesser than, and that begins to build up. But then the second question that we'll talk about.
That's a really sad story, Renee.
Sorry.
Feels like you need a hug. Sorry.
What was something someone said to you growing up that was positive and still impacts you today? And so I was thinking of that concept, and I remember when I was 17, I was raised in the Seventh Adventist Church, which is very strict. It's incredibly legalistic. And so all I knew, just like the pastor talked about today, was I knew the story of the gospel, but I certainly did not know Jesus or the God of the gospel. And so I was raised thinking and feeling like, gosh, I'm absolutely less than. And then when I'm 17, I'm beginning to ask questions, like help me understand the difference between what I was raised believing and what this church, just a regular non-denominational church, believes. And started asking all these like kind of foundational theological things. And I came to hear this concept of like, you mean that Jesus, like, he knows me? It stopped me in that moment, and it completely changed everything of how I understood life to be. And so those words have impacted from that moment on. So we want you to think about what are the words that have impacted you to believe lies and then hopefully truths.
Good luck with that. I'll just start. You're starting off, but that was, I don't know how your table went. That was kind of harder than you think. We thought that there'd be a lot of things that just kind of stand out. Maybe we're just sensitive, because I could, as I was talking about that, more stories started coming up. I remember when I was 18 or 19 years old, high school was over. Me and my friends, I felt like I was the one calling them. Maybe I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, I think. But I leaned on my friends a lot to hang out with, to make me not feel lonely. And so I remember my best friend at the time, Jason Bergen. I was on the phone with him and going, what are we doing this weekend? What are we doing? And he went, man, you're high maintenance. And I went, ooh, and it hurt. I was like, what does he mean by that? Is that good? It doesn't sound good. And so, I took that to go, okay, I got to ease back a little bit.
Rein it in.
But that was when I was 18 or 19 years old, and that I can remember verbatim that being said, so it stuck with me. Doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad thing. It just made me, search my soul and see if there's anything I needed to change.
Yeah, we did have some good convo. One of the comments made is, I don't know if you guys, it's a lengthy book, but it's called The Body Keeps the Score. It's this concept of how our body internalizes hurts and pains, especially trauma. But the idea is one of the concepts or pieces that it talks about is the vagus nerve. It's this nerve that runs from our head to our toes, and it connects every part of us. And so the power of words, we think that, man, it's going through our ears and we're processing them in our brain and we're trying to understand it. But in reality, as kind of what research has shown, is that it goes so much deeper than that. It begins to kind of inscribe itself into our cells and our body. And so the power can be that influential, which is why we want to shift to this concept of how do we create wisdom in our words? How do we inspire wisdom? If we focus on just one, because there's quite a bit in that list that we gave, we want to talk about right timing in the right way. And that's from Proverbs 25:11 through 12. It says, the right words at the right time is like a custom-made piece of jewelry, so it's fit specifically for you. And a wise friend's timely reprimand is like a gold ring slipped on your finger. So crazy that you think of reprimand being like a gold ring slipped on your finger, like this concept of, man, that fit perfectly, and I actually value it. I don't know that I'm great at that.
No, I think you slipped a gold ring on my finger in college when you said, I think you then reiterated that I was high maintenance, and then you broke up with me
That's true.
for like 6 months. So maybe that was 2 lessons. I'm that ignorant person that we've been talking about, that I have to fall into the ditch a couple times before I learn. And so you slipped a
We
gold
made
ring.
it, though.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So the first is this idea. We're going to go through what it means to know how to speak. So the first is know what to speak. You have to ask yourself, will this better our connection, even if it's hard to hear? If it's hard to share with your spouse, but you know that the intention behind the connection is so critical that you have to share it, think about, how can I share this? It is a difference between can I share it versus should I share it? And then we have know when to speak. So it's really right timing. Is this the right time to bring this up? You have to think of, are you flooded or overwhelmed with emotions? And so the way you're going to bring this up probably is not the greatest way. So is it time for you to calm down first? Are you overwhelmed, or are you dealing with, I'm just now going to be kind of nasty and do a silent treatment piece on them? There is a difference between healthy silence and unhealthy silence. So healthy silence is us taking a moment to go, okay, should I think about what I'm trying to communicate, not reacting but responding, to help really ask some questions here? Or am I having an unhealthy silence where I'm so angry that I'm kind of pushing away? And then we have know why to speak. And that is where we are asking and seeking out, what are my motives? What are my expectations that I hope will result if I'm having this conversation with this person? Am I being, Daniel talks a lot about this concept of like malicious or ignorant. This, is there intention behind I'm genuinely trying to hurt, or I just didn't know. It may have hurt, but it wasn't intentional. And there is a huge difference between that, especially from the spouse's perspective, is if it wasn't intended to be malicious, let's revisit it so we can see, oh gosh, I didn't mean to hurt you.
Right, and if that's continued to go on, thinking the spouse thinking that the person's doing that out of maliciousness, that's going to flavor their wellspring, and pretty soon they're going to start, the sediment is going to continue to build up because they think they're doing it maliciously. I mean, it's a fine line between intent, but if the person is not doing it maliciously, then they'll change once they're aware of it. Mm-hmm. They'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't know you felt that way. I'm so sorry. And then they'll stop doing it. Yeah. Otherwise, it was malicious. You done with yours? Mm-hmm. The next one is nowhere to speak. Is this the right place to bring this up? we're a big proponent to, if you're going to have a, like an argument, a healthy argument or conversation, have it in front of the kids. Like, again, healthy, but letting them see what that looks like and it repair at the end is a good thing. But there are some arguments or some things that you need to talk about that you don't do it in front of your kids. It has to be the right place. I've had many clients that come in when they're 12 years old, and they're naturally anxious, but they hear their parents or their dad say something about finances, or, man, I hope I have as many clients this next week or two than I've had this one. We're struggling. He hears his parents they hear him talking about that, and they come in and they're anxious because they don't know the end result, which is we're going to be fine. We have enough money in the bank or whatever. All they hear is, are we going to make it next week? And so they come in nervous. And so we have to be careful where we talk about it. And the next thing is, where are we talking about our spouse? Dennis Prager, a guy I listen to on the radio, talks about something that he considers worse than adultery, or harder to come back from, is what he says, is public humiliation. We have to be very careful how we talk about our spouse, with or without them being there. If my wife and we're out at dinner and I'm making fun of her, sorry, there's the Sasquatch. Anyway, intended. That's malicious or ignorant. I feel like I was ignorant, but Chrissy, I'm starting to sweat. No, public humiliation. If it's the intent, am I trying to humiliate my spouse in front of people? And again, not even for a joke, but to just look what I have to put up with, and that kind of stuff. And that's not the right place to air out your dirty laundry, with or without them there. There's times in the past where I've been with guys, not recently, not with any of you here, that talks negatively constantly about their spouse. And pretty soon it's just kind of like, this is uncomfortable. I don't want, it's like, does your wife know that you're thinking like this about her? And so we have to be careful where we are choosing to communicate and how we're going to communicate. And the next one is know how to speak. How can I approach this in a way that encourages healthy communication? And for me, this just goes back to, what's my motivation? What do I want them to take away from our conversation? And if my motivation is, pure, if I want them to just like, this is how I felt, then I'm going to be able to come in, hopefully, with like a soft startup. I'm not going to come in blaming and making her defensive. I want her to learn about me by me expressing how I felt, and so I need to do it in a way that she's going to be able to receive it.
So what does it look like to actually repair? If you've ever heard of pastor theologian Tim Keller, he has a story of him and his wife earlier on in their marriage. He's sitting at the end of his bed, and there's a closet across from him. And every night he would take off his shoes and one by one just throw them into the closet, and you just hear a clunk. He did that a few nights in a row, and his wife Kathy is like, why are you doing that? You can see that it's scuffing up the inside of the closet. Can you stop doing that? And he's like, oh, yeah, sorry about that. So because it is a habit, the next nights come, and she's hearing clunk, 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 but not saying anything. So she's just saying, like, well, we already talked about it. I don't really want to be a nag, so hopefully he figures this out. He can see the scuff marks. So 40 clunks later, they're having another little argument or disagreement, and it's kind of getting heated, and she's like, well, you don't care, because obviously there's all these scuff marks that you haven't stopped that either. And he's like, whoa, this is unreasonable anger based off what we're talking about here. But he didn't know, kind of like that sediment that's building up, that she was struggling with, yeah, you don't care because you're not doing anything about it. We've talked about it, and yet it's not changing. And so in that moment, even though it was, quite a number of times later, he began to see, wow, you're right. I didn't do anything about it because it was kind of insignificant to me. I didn't think much. But it's not to her. And so the change happened. He said, well, what can I do? Which is the greatest question. And she said, well, figure out how you can remind yourself, because again, it's not up to the spouse to keep reminding and letting them know. So he wrote a little Post-it and he said, hey, stupid, stop throwing your shoes in the closet, stop hurting your wife, signed God. And so from that moment, kind of this intention behind, he's got to take account for making some changes. So what does that look like practically? First, the first is call it. We actually have to genuinely name what we're doing. One of the first killers, aside from humility and contempt and all the hurts that can happen, it really boils down to selfishness. It's the moment that, you get married and you think everything's great and you love your spouse and you're thinking of their needs and what makes them happy. And it begins to shift over to, well, what makes me happy? So we have to call out when we have shifted to selfishness. And that really is like a daily, oops, being selfish again, sorry about that. And being honest to our spouse. The second is confessing it, which really is saying, I'm going to let you know I have hurt you and I'm sorry about that. I'm intentionally going to speak that and make sure that they hear you're owning whatever the behavior is. Maybe it just came to light, but finally you're realizing it. The other is true on the other side. You want to sneak in?
Yeah, I'm going to sneak in.
Okay.
Back to the water heater. We're a water heater theme this morning. Last week we talked about the wellspring and guarding our heart and the wellspring. And so if you look at yourself as the water heater, we can start having good input, and clean the water out on the top. But over the years, if that sediment doesn't get released, there's things that you're not going to be worked through. Even if you've made changes, without confession and a removal of that sediment, that scar tissue that has built up over time, your spouse isn't going to heal. Mm-hmm. And so, again, we have to have the water coming in, but also release the things that we need to forgive, or at least need to bring up and process through. Some things aren't going to be just easily to forgive. And so you're going to have to bring that up and this you did over the years really hurt me. And I want to make sure that that's not going to continue to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that looks like the FBI. So it's this formula of state the feeling that you're experiencing with the behavior, and I is impact. So feeling is, I'm feeling incredibly frustrated and unheard because you keep throwing these shoes in the closet and making scuffs, or because you are disregarding what I said, several times over. And the impact is it makes me pull away, makes me not trust, it makes me guarded. And so hopefully your spouse is saying, well, I certainly don't want that. I'm sorry. And beginning to see, well, what does it look like to change it? So we have to admit that if there's no behavior change behind what we're doing, our words really do not matter. So we have to intentionally think of, are there like sticky notes we need to put around? Are there alarms we need to set? Are there messages that need to be stated, because the behavior has to match the words?
So, week 1, our theme verse for that week was Proverbs 18:21, which is the importance of communication. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Week 2, we talked about in Proverbs 4:23, it says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And this week, our theme verse is Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And I think if you've grown up in the church at all, you've heard that one a lot. And I just kind of went, yeah, iron sharpens iron, blah, blah, blah. And you just kind of move through it, just like he was talking about earlier, the verses that just kind of you hear and it doesn't really resonate. But I kind of did some research on a dull knife and what makes a knife dull. And what happens is when you hit a knife on a hard surface over and over again, the little edge actually begins to fold and bend. And then if you throw it in the drawer and it gets little chips along the edge of the blade, and you throw it in the dishwasher, which I didn't know you're not supposed to put knives in a dishwasher because Tachi knew. She's agreeing with me. Because corrosion, and corrosion builds up on the end of the blade, and it makes it dull. It makes it to where we have knives in our drawer that we don't use because we just bought a new one because it works better, and that one just stays there unused alone. We are sorry, that it got really dramatic.
Yeah.
There are knives down there that we just don't touch. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know.
And so we are called to sharpen each other, which, apart from God being the Spirit within us, shining light on areas in our lives that we need to have sharpened, our spouse is the next one in line that is going to be the one that points these imperfections out. And it takes more than just kind of pointing them out. It's if you've sharpened a knife, you're sliding it on the sharpening stone, and it's making a noise. And that was not a good sound effect, but you get the point. That sound, if a knife could talk, it would be yelling or screaming. It's painful to have those imperfections torn off and that edge seared off to make it straight again. But that's what we're asked to do in the Bible and for each other, is if I choose to hold back sharpening her knife because it's going to be painful for me, I'm going to have to put up with an argument for the next 3 days or whatever it is, then I'm choosing to let her stay dull and not be as effective as a parent, as a wife, as a friend.
I think you called me dull. I didn't like it.
That's a hurtful word that she's going to remember later when there's a class of who hurt you. But in vice versa, is I have to be open to being sharpened, and it's going to be painful, but that's what God has for us. And so our question for you guys: are you willing to be sharpened and sharpen the one closest to us?
Yeah, these are some fun questions again. So how do you think you help to sharpen your spouse? And how has your spouse helped to sharpen you? And then as we were kind of wrapping this up, Daniel thought of an extra, which you don't get points for it. So if you want, there's our son. Hey, buddy. And one of our best friends, Jason Arviso. So our last question was, what hurt the most while being sharpened, but now you're grateful it's gone?
All right. Hey, guys, we're going to wrap up, make sure we get you in time to your kiddos. But I have Dana with me. She's in charge of all small groups here at Bayside, a big job. So you kind of want to tell people what's going on after this class and how they can get connected to a small group.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, I love that you were talking about iron sharpening iron. What a great leadway into small groups, because that's exactly what we do. We get to live life together around your kitchen table, around your coffee table. We get to build each other up, carry one another's burdens, and we need small group leaders. With a church this size, we have so many new people coming in that we want to keep them and we want them to be discipled. And if God is tugging at your heartstrings to potentially lead a small group, we have small group leader trainings. As a matter of fact, we're doing one right after this, and we will do them regularly. We have cards on your table, and we would love to capture your information. And if you are interested, continue the conversations.
But yeah, we would love, I've had a lot of people say, oh, can I join a small group? Do you guys have a small group? So Married with Kids is kind of the life stage, the middle group. So there's big church, then there's life stage group, but then the small group is where really life can change and you can strengthen one another. So we need small group leaders. I sometimes don't have any place to put them. They ask me, Jordan, can you lead a small group? Nope, I'm done. But we've been in a lot of great small groups. Some of our friends in here, we've made lifelong friends because of small groups we've been here at Bayside. So if you have that calling, you're like, maybe you can also pair up with a couple. That we found that works out, right?
Absolutely. Really the best and the highest success rate for small groups or capturing your friends. We do have the group finder, but it's when you gather your friends together. And I have to tell you a story. We ran small groups in our home for years. So my kids grew up, and we had the kids come. We had a back room. We had a babysitter come in and take care of them. And finally, I patched all the holes on my walls, and my son said, "Mom, you're covering up all my memories." But you know what? Those holes are worth it. It's so worth it. Those kids are great friends today, and I love the life stage that you guys are in. I know you're exhausted come 9 o'clock at night, but you're building great memories. So small groups is where it's at.
Yeah. So they can fill this out, or they can text.
You can text groups to 56316 and select on the lead a group, fill out that information, and we will get back with you. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Go get your kiddos, and we'll see you next Sunday, or you can be in class here after for small group leader training. Thanks, guys.